We are talking about the number one tip to be a better spouse. And who better to talk about with than my spouse, Matt?
Hi there.
Welcome to the Loveable as Fuck Show with Sherry Yazzie. I am a plus-size Indigenous woman in a world that tells me not to love myself. I fucking do. Here's how I do it.
For more on how to defuck yourself, love yourself, and my emotional resiliency magnifying, life-transforming mindset hacks and self-care tools that you need to know now in order to transform your life and be happy as fuck, go to beloveableaf.com. That's beloveableaf.com. So in today's Momcast, we were talking about the number one tip to be a better spouse. And instead of just getting a tip from me, I thought I would invite my beautiful husband on to give a tip as well.
Thank you. I like being beautiful.
I like that you're beautiful as well. Okay, so before we get into it, actually, Matt and I were talking about this, and we actually have separate tips. They obviously go together pretty well since we've been married almost 20 years. We're coming up on 20 years. Are you excited?
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Can you believe it?
It's hard to believe, yeah. A lot of trials, a lot of tribulations, but we made it, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, we're not to October yet, but I think we'll probably we'll make it there.
Yeah, we can do it. We can do it.
Gonna do it.
One step at a time, one day at a time.
Exactly. So, before we get into the tips, what both of us were talking about as we were talking about our own tips was commitment. Commitment is the basis of this. So if you're listening to this and you have one foot outside the relationship, or maybe your partner has one foot outside the relationship, this is going to be a harder go. So this isn't about doing it better or more, but if you're both committed, then there are some things inside your relationship that can make a big difference, that has made a big difference in our marriage. But if you're one foot outside the marriage, and here's the thing, if you are, I have been. How about you?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It happens. Let's not pretend that it doesn't happen. It does, even to the most committed people. Matt and I that's been a big strength in our relationship, is we're both really committed to this. When we were young, and because we got together when we were 19 years old, but right in there, we actually did a transformational training. And one of the distinctions that we learned was basically that wherever you stop in relationship is where you stop. So it's not about the other person and what they're not doing or what they are doing. It's really where you stop. Now, I will say there are caveats here for deal breakers that are so big that, I wouldn't be willing to go on, even though that's me still stopping. But what I would say is that has been a really strong foundation. It's kind of even if the relationship has been struggling, I know that there's things I can do over here, right? I can't do anything over there, but I can do stuff over here. And I can just keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep taking good care of myself and trusting that we'll figure it out. We'll figure out the way that we both can move forward. How about you? Yeah,
no, I think that's really well said. What you talked about with the commitment, it's kind of the basis of all of it, right? Because if you're watching this or listening to this podcast or watching this video and you say, I want to be a better spouse, but you're not fully committed, you're not 100% in the relationship, you're all in, let's do this, right? That would affect things as far as how you would interpret or how you'd, listen to this information, right? I think that for us, or at least for me, commitment is something that I constantly have to refresh myself with, right? So I'll have a moment where I'll feel hey, I should have a foot outside the relationship. Okay, whoa, wait a sec, Matt. Put yourself back in, 100% committed. And if, like you said, if you're 100% committed to the relationship, then all this other stuff that we're going to be talking about, it just kind of has a different frame to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, so for us, commitment got set up powerfully. And the other thing was, for a long time, it was the only way out is death. And then, we got a little older, a little bit more wise. And I would say that there can be deal breakers in a marriage. There truly can be. There can be mismatches. There can be things. But if you're committed and he's committed or she's committed, you're able to work it out, right? It's things can be shifted with communication. Things can be shifted with habits. Things can be shifted. Maybe you haven't been connecting. Maybe you haven't been taking the time to go on dates. I mean, if you're like us through the whole 2020 with the pandemic, there was no going out, right? And for a whole bunch of time, I mean, we didn't have any sort of like, our child couldn't go anywhere. So it was like, all of us were here. There was no me and him time. Like, we had to carve that stuff out, and it was rough. It was not easy, where before, like, we had weekly dates, and we actually had a couple of weekly dates, one during the day and one at night, different days of the week. And it was like, it made a difference in our connection. And so there can be things like that as well.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I'm not sure who's like watching this or listening to this, but like, a lot, like, statistics say that, like, what is it, like 50, or I don't know what the percentage is of marriages that end up in divorce.
Yeah.
What is the percentage? Is it 50 or 70%?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's a huge percentage, right?
It is.
So that tells you that, like, there's actually a lot more, there's, you know, a lot of relationships that are in turmoil and in crisis and are struggling than maybe what is presented on the surface as far as what people show publicly, like on Instagram. Hey, everything's great.
Yeah.
But in reality, you know, if 50 to 70% of relationships end in divorce, then things probably aren't so great, you know, because you're dealing with human beings, and human beings go through all kinds of stuff, you know, emotional ups and downs. They go through commitment issues. They go through, I mean, all the stuff that happens inside a relationship. Gosh, I mean, what else? Like addiction, there's like, you know, all the things that can happen, you know, that people don't necessarily talk about. Like like it's known, right? We know that relationships have issues, but like people don't talk about it openly on Instagram, right?
Someone sharing on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. Actually, my husband, he's a severe alcoholic and has been having blackout drunks. And so that's the update here.
Yeah,
No, people
and I took my kids
that.
to the mom's this weekend, to my mom's house this weekend.
No, people
because we didn't want to be around him. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of more, you know, there is that, you know, so I think we should acknowledge that. Yeah,
for sure, and there can be things. So one thing I will say though is, if your relationship maybe is just struggled through the pandemic, maybe it's just feeling a little stale, maybe you are not getting your needs met, maybe. So we're not talking big deal breakers here, but you maybe are feeling a little bit like a foot out of the relationship. What I will say is, every time I felt that way, who was miserable was me. It's a continual misery. Like, is this where I should be? Is this the right thing? Is this how it's supposed? Like, and there's no ability to work and move forward together when you're doing that, right? Like, I can't control whether he has his feet in the relationship, but I can control whether I have my feet in the relationship. And I've always felt better when both feet are firmly planted in here, and I'm like, let's do this. You know, it might be difficult, it might be bumpy, but we can do this. We can keep going.
Yeah, and sorry, just one thing I'm seeing is, like, maybe somebody who's listening to this is saying they're kind of judging themselves, right? Saying, I'm not a good spouse, right? How can I be a better spouse? You know, and maybe you're being too hard on yourself. Maybe you need to look for the ways that you actually are a good spouse, and maybe there is some improvement to be made. Like, you know, there's changes that have to happen, like for you to feel like good about yourself as far as how you are inside the relationship.
Which actually brings me to my tip, right? So exactly. So it's show up for you the way that you want your spouse to show up for you in your relationship. Like, that's a lot of words, but literally show up the way that you want to be treated. Do you want to be important to your spouse? Are you important to you? Do you want your spouse to make you a priority? Are you a priority to you? Like, do you actually show it with time, effort, energy, and money? Like, that you are a priority. You know, does your bank account balance, if we were going through, do you ever spend money on you? Do you take time for you? Like, these are the things. If you want your partner to be buying you shit, you better be buying you shit. And not advocating overspending or anything, but if you never, like, if you want that latte, you're like, I love these lavender lattes from this really special coffee shop, and every time I get one, I feel so good about myself and I feel so good about the world, but you never let yourself go get one. That's going to be hard for your partner to treat you, because it doesn't match energetically. When you start treating on the podcast you can't see it, but I have my nails and I got my cute pride nail, and I treat myself. I take good care of myself. Mm-hmm. It invites him to also take good care of me.
Yeah.
Whereas when I wasn't taking good care of me, what was it like for you?
That's a good question. When you were saying that, I was thinking back to, it's not just like spending money on yourself. Like, it's the things that you say to yourself too,
Yeah.
right? When we're talking about taking good care of yourself, like before, the way you used to be is, you had low energy. Like you weren't really like, you kind of, you didn't have that glow about you. When we first met, one of the first things I told her was, hey, you were beautiful back then, because we had met before. I said, but now you're glowing. Well, she kind of like lost that glow, like, and was more like, you struggled with like getting out of bed and just like kind of down and kind of depressed and stuff like that. But I think some of the things that you were saying to yourself was probably, I don't know, but I imagine you were probably dealing with a lot of guilt, a lot of negative self-talk. Mm-hmm. And so now I see you more, talking about yourself like, I am awesome, I'm great, I'm amazing. I hear you say those things a lot more. Of course,
because he's like, I love you. I'm like, of course you do.
Yeah.
I'm wonderful.
Yeah, of course you do. Yeah. And before it was kind of like, you do?
Are you sure? Why?
Yeah.
Tell me more. How much do you love me?
Yeah.
Do you like, okay, I'm going to get this need met.
Yeah.
But since there was no love here for me,
right.
Even when he would say the things, they were never right or good enough, right? Like, truly to penetrate through. I could feel it, right, a little bit. But in my opinion, it discounted his love for me, because it was hard for me to imagine that really anybody could feel that way. Mm-hmm. But how was it for you when I was depressed, when I was struggling, when I wasn't showing up for me?
Yeah, it felt like pressure for me. Like, I was the source of what made you feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which never feels good. It made me feel like distancing myself, because, there's all that pressure, and like, I better not screw it up or blow it, because Sherry's self-esteem is going to blow if I say that, right? So, so that's how it felt, I would say.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things is when you aren't giving yourself these things, you're putting an immense amount of pressure on the relationships around you, not just your partner, but usually your kids, your friends, because you aren't okay and you want them to make you okay. But the problem with this is it never works. The only way for you to get that validation, for you to get that sense of security, is inside of you. And the way that I did it was starting to show up and take care of me. Like what feels good to me. I remember so Matt and I have done marriage counseling off and on, a lot of our marriage actually. Mm-hmm. And I remember we went in for kind of like a tune-up, and at the time my therapist was like, Sherry, what's going, she didn't say what's wrong with you. She's like, what's going on with you? Because we were struggling. Matt was in a particular struggle place as well. And we kind of went in more for that. But as we were talking, she's like, I'm really concerned about you. Like, your like energy is so low. She's like, what is different this year than last year? Because it was actually a very similar issue that we went in for. And she's like, because last year was different. And I'm like, well, I stopped going out to lunch with a friend every month. I stopped getting my nails done every other month. And I stopped getting a massage every month or every other month, somewhere in there. Like, literally, those were the only 3 things that changed, because at the time we were struggling so badly financially, I just didn't feel like I could do it. And she was like, and those are the only 3 things. I'm like, yes. Because I was like hanging on by a thread. And she's like, no, I'm not going to tell you what to do, because that's a therapist for you. She's like, but you might decide that those things are so important that you actually need to do them. And it was the first time it really, truly, I could actually see, because the year before we'd kind of had a little bit of a struggle, but Matt was more struggling, but I was holding it. I was doing okay. I was showing up as a mom. I was doing the next year, just not doing those 3 things. I was hanging by a very, very thin thread, and Matt was struggling. So like our whole family was in turmoil, right? Because I wasn't doing those 3 things, and that was it. I wasn't taking the time. I wasn't taking the time to get cared for. I wasn't taking the time to get those needs met. Because what does massage do? Massage is a continual of someone actually touching you in a healing manner for an extended period. What that does for your oxytocin, what it does for all your happiness chemicals is amazing. Plus, of course, helping your body. And then my nails, like having someone care for me, having it not be something that I had to be responsible for. that was a big deal too. So, and then going out to lunch with a friend, like something very simple, but where I could just be me. I could just be Sherry, not mom, not wife, just Sherry. I could just show up and just chill the fuck out. And that made those simple things. So literally, it's when I started taking on my care as mandatory for our relationship to be able to survive, for our relationship and our family to be able to thrive. If I'm not taking on my care, because this is the way I think of it, right? So if somebody said this, and I was like, this is the most perfect example. They said, women, moms, we are the sun. Whether we are like shutting down, our families can feel it. Whether we're burning up, our families can feel it. We are like the ones who set the tone in our home for the most part. And I feel like that's totally true. And if you're taking care of your star, then it's so much easier to show up and be the mom and be the wife. And your partner can still have the things that they have, right? Just like if Matt's doing great and I'm struggling, he's more able to actually provide the space for me to work this out, for me to talk to him, for me to have the support that I need. So it goes back and forth, but when we're not doing that, for me, that was the most dangerous, I think, place it had ever been as far as me showing up and being the kind of mom I wanted, the kind of wife I wanted to be, the kind of person I just wanted to be.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. So, yeah. So for me, I was trying to think, because that was a good tip, right? And I think that's important. And, that probably is the number one tip. So I probably have like the number 2 tip, right? But, what I was thinking is, and again, like I'm not a relationship expert. I'm just sharing from personal experience. Like, I think that willingness is, and it goes along with commitment, right? So commitment is one thing, but then what about willingness, right? Willingness to give up being right, for example. Like, I think that inside a relationship, we often say, oh, well, that bitch, she did that, and that's the reason, things didn't work out. She was like this, and she was like that. Or, he was an asshole, and he didn't do this, and he did that, and he was always like that. So that's why, things didn't work out inside our relationship, right? So there's kind of like a righteousness thing, right? And if you are willing to give up being right in the relationship, right, I think that it creates a whole new space. Like, for us, like, I have to, sometimes give up being right about things. And it's hard, right? Because my ego says, no, I'm right, right? But if I'm willing to give up being right, then I'm able to see things in a way, and I almost like let the space be that she can be right. She can be right about this. And it like gives me a freedom. Like, I don't have to hold on to that. Like, there's like a story about the monkey who grabs onto the moldy peanut, and it's inside like a, one of those monkey trap things that's a jar down in the ground. And the monkey grabs onto the moldy peanut, and then he tries to grab his hand out of the jar, but his hand is stuck in the jar because he wants that peanut. And if he would just let go of the peanut and let his hand relax and loose, he could just pull his hand out of that jar. So I guess in a way, like, being right is kind of like that. It's like, it's this thing that you get to hold on to. Like, it makes you kind of feel powerful or whatever, like for me, but it doesn't necessarily further along the relationship. And if I'm really committed to furthering the relationship, then I got to let go of the moldy peanut. So I think that's it. Like, just kind of like the willingness to be right. So we were talking about one movie that like impacted us several years ago.
And before he gets into this, I'm not advocating this. We are not Christian. But there were some bits in there that made a huge difference for us.
Yeah, I always look at things and I would try to go to the message versus, try to say, oh, it's all or nothing. Like, oh yeah, I watched this movie, therefore, I'm going to, become Mormon or something the next day. No, that's not me. But what I'm saying is the movie was called Fireproof, by the way. So in the movie Fireproof, you watch a transformation. The reason I think it's a really powerful movie is because you watch the transformation of one of the partners inside the relationship. And at the beginning of the movie, the relationship is like, it's ready to end. Like, it's ready to be divorced. They're holding on their relationship on a single thread because, there's no commitment there. both of them have one foot out the door. He's watching porn and like looking at like boats and his dream boat, you know, and saving up money. Like he's all like very selfish and very self-centered. Like that's where his thinking is. And she's like, look, eyeballing this doctor guy because she's like, I can't stand my husband, so maybe it'll be better with this doctor guy. So that's kind of where the relationship is in the beginning. And through the movie, though, you watch a transformation. The character is played by that guy from Growing Pains. Kirk Cameron, yeah. And you watch
again, not advocating for him.
But you watch a transformation of the character, and you watch him, he gives up being right because he was so right about the relationship. Oh, it's she does this and she does that and she's the problem, right? So he gives up like resentment, being right. And then you watch him make an effort inside the relationship. So like, you know, first he buys her flowers. Now it doesn't work out so well because the flowers are kind of like shitty, but at least he made an effort, right? So he's kind of moving in the forward direction, but he was kind of like checking off a box, right? He was like, okay, fine, I'll buy her some flowers there, you know? But he gets better at it. He starts to realize, he starts to internalize it in his heart about who he wants to be. Not just like inside a relationship, but what kind of person does he want to be inside of the relationship and inside of life in general. And he realizes that the addiction to porn is not serving him. He's willing to give up that because, you know, he finds that he's really disconnected and really selfish. And he kind of realizes that that's not necessarily the kind of person that he wants to be. Who he wants to be is giving and kind and loving. And so he understands that that is what he wants. And then he slowly becomes softer as a human being, like less, you know, and more like, you know, more being who he says he wants to be, kind, loving, gentle, the words that he says, the words that he writes down, the actions that he takes inside of the relationship. So I use that as an example to say, like, I think that the willingness is the tip that I could offer, like, as far as I think that's a powerful movie because it shows a way. It was a realization for me about who do I want to be inside the relationship. And I think that's what women want, man. I think women want a friggin' man, right? Don't they?
Yeah.
They want a man and they don't want a boy. And, you know, so many women are married to boys and in relationship with boys, and they want their man to be a man. But, you know, a lot of times men don't have any role model for what a man is or any idea of an image in their mind of what to be as far as being a man. And a willingness to explore that, a willingness to look at that, I think, and the willingness to ask yourself the question. You know, anybody who's watching this, I guess they have the willingness really to ask the question, you know, how can I be a better spouse? And if that's present for a man or a woman, then I think that is a huge tip that can be beneficial to the relationship.
So what did you get out of that movie? Like, what did that do for you?
Like I said, I think that seeing it in somebody else was very clear to see it in myself, right? How I was being selfish, how I was being all about me, and how I was, you know, I was like disconnected from you. I wasn't treating our relationship with respect or taking our relationship seriously. So seeing him was an inspiration to me about what kind of husband I can be.
Nice.
Yeah.
So since most of my listeners and or watchers are women, and most of them are married to or in a relationship with a man, there are some who are not. But if we're the partner and, you know, we're willing, but our partner isn't, like,
yeah.
And you talked about being married to a boy versus a man.
Yeah.
I mean, I have an idea here about kind of some things that shifted for me in our relationship, but what is, like, how did we get How would, because they can't, they have no control over what their partner does or doesn't do. But what would you say?
Well, I think that one thing that you did that was very good, like, is you made it clear what it is that you wanted, right? Yeah. So when you were clear about what it is that you wanted, you could actually communicate to me about what you wanted for me. And you often would tell me things like, I want you, Matt Gunnifson, to decide. Not just do it to be like a good boy and check off boxes inside the relationship, but I want you to speak from what you want and tell me what it is that you want, communicate from what it is that you want. And, you said things like, I want to be touched. I want to be cared for and taken care of. Like, this is what my standards are, and this is what I want inside the relationship. And so then, I guess you could say like the universal principles were at play, right? Because if you say this is what you want, then the universe can deliver it to you in some way, form, or fashion. But if you're not clear about what you want, and you're not clear with your spouse about what it is that you want, or your significant other, then it would probably be a lot more difficult for those things to come to you in your life.
Yeah. And I think, too, one thing that was really powerful for me in our relationship is I used to say, it was like this weird muddied thing. I didn't say things like very clearly, like, I want this. This is what would work for me now. This is how I would like our relationship to go. This is the kind of man I would like to be with. These are the kind of qualities I value in a partnership. Like, I wasn't being very clear, right? Like, it was more like I would babble on for a really long time and hope that he could pick out the bits that were the most important.
Yeah, or maybe complain about the way I was being.
Yeah,
right?
There's that, which doesn't work.
Gee,
just
thanks.
So you know.
Yeah. Got it.
and nobody's perfect, right? Sometimes you still get mad, sometimes you still complain. Stuff happens. But overall, I felt like the most powerful communications were when I was very clear, like, I want this. This is how I want my relationship to look. Like, this is the kind of relationship I'm looking for. And even though we were married, right? Like, if without him knowing what I was looking for, what would work for me in our relationship, it wasn't going to like magically come around, right? I had to communicate this. And then here's the second part, is I used to, even as I started getting to where I could communicate it, then I would start to tell him all the ways he could do that for me. That was not useful. I'm trying to save you some time here. You communicate and walk away. If your partner has something to say, have them say it. But it's not for you to help them figure it out. It's not for you to give them a nice big long list. Okay, so then if you'll touch me for 20 minutes every day and I can just put the reminder in your phone, it's not going to give you the what you're looking for. It's not actually going to give you what you're looking for. Whereas I made the communications and I just trusted that whatever happened whatever was meant to happen was going to happen. And then waited to see what he did, how he showed up, how he wanted to be here. Because when he or you, anybody, when we find our own motivation, when we find the way that it works best for us, that's where actual changes happen, in my opinion. But if he's doing things because he wants to check off the box like he talked about, that never worked. And me going through and telling him all the specific ways and how it could look, and that was very much creating boxes for him to check. And he would, to his credit, because he really does love me, would give it a go to check off all those boxes. But it was hard. It didn't feel, and I didn't get what I needed from it. He wasn't getting what he needed from it. It wasn't doing what I needed it to do, right? So that's what I'd say, is make the communication about what you want, be very clear, and then allow for your partner to find that motivation within themselves. And sometimes your partner might not be willing to do that. And that's something that is another piece of this, is I got really, really clear that if he didn't, that was okay. The universe was still going to come through for me and give me the kind of relationship that I was looking for. I love him. I want to be with him. But having it, is this energy of clinging on. It has to be you, Matt. You have to do this. Wasn't actually creating a healthy relationship between the two of us. It wasn't until I let it go and went, okay, you know what I mean? This is what I need, and this is what I'm looking for day to day. This is what I'm looking for in a man. This is what I'm looking for in a partner. And let it go. Then he figured it out. He started showing up more. He started, because he's committed, right? But I can't make that be so. The best thing I can do is be committed to me, take good care of me, make really clear requests, and just trust. So how has it been since I've been doing more like that?
Well, we still have our ups and downs.
Yes. True.
Ain't gonna lie.
No.
But at least it's clear what it is that you want, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, that's good, right? Because I feel like, we've talked about this, right, in our relationship. Like, we've always been raising the standards inside our relationship, raising the standards for our life. We make a lot more money than we used to. Our relationship's a lot better than it used to be. So we're growing as individuals and getting better at things. So, but anyway, you made you had a realization for and a declaration for, this is what I want in a relationship. So at least it was clear to me now, okay, I understand now, who I can be, that, it will make you happy, right? But I mean, I wasn't
not
doing
make me happy.
Right, but I guess I wasn't doing it to make you happy, but I guess I got clear about what it is that you wanted, which, gave me clarity as far as, how I can grow, partly how I can grow as an individual in a way. I mean, even though, like I said, it's not like I'm checking off boxes to do it for you, but at least I was clear about what it is that you wanted and what you're after. And, and I actually agreed to them. I actually liked a lot of the things that you said. So it brought about, I guess, awareness in me about how I could be.
Yeah.
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 And like Matt said, I don't think there's really any easy answers to this, because things happen. Pandemics happen. Stress happens. People lose their jobs, or your business idea doesn't work, or whatever it is. Like, stress can come upon the marriage. And I would say one of the things that really helped us lately is this whole idea of couple generosity. So showing up for the couple, showing up for your person without, expectations of payback, without, just literally like, what would help Matt here? What would feel good for me to do for Matt, or vice versa? Like, and starting to show up with that generous spirit, right? Because if you're in a marriage, you'd be like, well, I changed the baby's diaper last time, and I did the laundry last time.
Keeping score, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's just, I mean, that stuff kind of just creeps in if you're not watching. But like, what does it look like? So I'll give you a really specific example. Matt yesterday with a guy we hired, put finish on the boards underneath our deck because they were starting to get weathered. And so he'd worked outside all day long. It was super windy, kind of unpleasant in my opinion. I wasn't out there, but it seemed yucky. And so he had laundry sitting on the couch, and I just folded it up because I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this for him because he did something awesome. Again, it wasn't like a tit for tat thing, but I was like, I actually want him to feel cared about. So I'm going to fold these.
Which I appreciate, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's another thing. I'd say the other thing is acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is massive, right?
Yeah.
Acknowledgement of, hey, thanks for loading the dishwasher this morning. Or, thanks for holding me last night. Or thanks for feeding the dog. Or whatever it is. Like, and just even thanks for just being here, like breathing in and out.
Yeah. And I guess that if you were to sum that up, I mean, the way I look at it is basically that's an attitude.
Yeah.
An attitude about the relationship, right? Do you have an attitude of gratitude about the relationship? I know it sounds corny or cheesy, or do you have an attitude of, what is your attitude about the relationship? Because it'll reflect, like, people like to be around people who, if you feel grateful for them, like, they can feel that and they like being in that space. But being made wrong and, being shown all the things that you're not good at, or, kind of being put down, like, people don't like to be around that space. So And, so again, like a thing for us is just constantly watching, I think, our attitude around each other. What's our attitude towards each other,
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you, when you're not feeling that, when you can't find things to acknowledge about your partner, it is no wonder both of you want to check out, right? Like, because it doesn't feel good. The whole thing doesn't feel good. And so actively looking for ways to acknowledge your partner can actually jumpstart that connection again, because you're looking for, what can I say? Like, what can I acknowledge him for? What could I do? Again, unbidden, just because you want to, because you're committed to the relationship. What could you do today? What could you do today that would be sweet? What could you do today that would forward the connection? The question that we've actually are in right this week is, what does alignment look like for our couple? So in being together, right? Because there's me and there's him. But then there's this thing we've created in the world that is us together. And what does alignment look like? What do we say? How do we communicate? What actions do we take? Like, what looks like alignment as far as us moving forward? As forward with our family, forward with our plans. Like, so these are things that we're in an inquiry in. And I don't think there's any ever, like, you're not done. You're never done until you're dead. That's my overall feeling on all of this. But when you want to grow together, you create these things together. Like, what does that look like? And you start in the inquiry of it, right? So I hope that you listening here, that this was great for you. Let me know. Let me know if you'd like to hear from Matt and hear his side of it. Hear how it goes for him, right? Because you hear a lot from me all the time. I bet I could get him to come back on if you guys really like this, but let me know. And if you are a woman, an entrepreneur who is doing shit in the world and you're looking for support, not pretend support, real, raw, actual support. You're looking for support around relationships or your business. You're looking for somewhere to be safe and talk about the advocacy work that you're doing, standing up for social justice, because this shit can get lonely out there. Like, you can feel like out on the hairy edge by yourself. But there's other of us who are doing the work, who are out there actively spreading spreading the message, using our voice, standing up. If this is you and you want help burning it, or like juggling it, like you want some support because you're like, I'm juggling everything and I'm getting burned the fuck out, then I have something amazing for you. Because not only do you get the support from other badass women, you're actually going to get my coaching program, or my belief work program, which will actually help you to go from burnout to breakthrough, right? So it's not just little increments. This is actually taking care of that, because you're here to do things. I want to see you do them, and I want to help support you. If that's for you, go ahead and click down in there. It's called The Uprising. Find out more, and I'd love to see you in there. In case nobody has told you yet today, you are lovable as fuck, just the way you are. To send me your questions or stories, email me at loveableafshow@gmail.com. If you loved the show, please comment, like, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if you're listening on the podcast, please leave a review and subscribe to help me get this show in front of more women who need to know that they are lovable as fuck, just as they are. Check out the show notes or go to belovableaf.com. That's beloveableaf.com for more of how to unfuck yourself, love yourself, and be happy no matter your size. I said it before and I will say it again. You are lovable as fuck, just as you are.